Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are. The Quantum Mechanics, the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. Depending on when you listen to this, there's been a couple of big things that I came across in the news this week. Everybody's been talking about alien life on other planets with a high chance that they might exist. That's been very exciting. The other one I sent to you, Ben, which was a bit worrying, was we did an episode a while back you did on number stations with those kind of coded radio stations that are used by spies and governments, and I think the Russian one's called the buzzer, is it?
It is the buzzer, yeah.
Which I think, from my memory and when we did the podcast, it's been putting out pretty much the same message forever. But in the last week or so, it started putting out loads of different messages, which is slightly worrying. Because it's rumoured to be used by their nuclear submarines, is it? Or just generally?
Well, there's rumours that it might be a dead hand, but obviously that isn't what it's doing at the moment.
Yeah.
But it could be communicating with subs. It could be talking to sleeper agents. Yeah, it could be doing anything. Who knows with our Russian friends?
Yeah, it's quite scary though that it started doing something different, which is a bit of a worry. So.
Yeah.
So, yes, good news about potential life on other planets, bad news of potential the end of life on this one. So,
it giveth and it taketh away.
Yeah, exactly.
Although that potential life, as you were saying, like it might just be algae.
Yeah, that's life.
It is life. It is life. But
you want full old aliens, don't you, with mind warp machines?
I wouldn't
That's
mind.
what you're looking for.
Well, you remember the Great Moon hoax? I want bat people.
Bat people and
and
bisons.
Intelligent beavers.
Yeah, and bisons.
Bisons, yeah. What's the difference? No, wash your hand in a bison. Anyway, we are recording this on Easter weekend. It is Good Friday.
Yeah.
And I do have some bunny-related stuff coming up. But this week, it is mainly about... I've been looking into the work of several authors who have been cataloguing things that children have reported seeing. Yeah. Quite often, I think, ignore what children say. We put it down to imagination or just telling stories. And before I get into those stories, I had a little look around and I found a fantastic article in The Guardian from about a year ago about childhood hallucinations.
Right.
Apparently these are really common. So from children's imagination, they sometimes do have real hallucinations that they cannot distinguish between their perceptual experience that is actually there and their imagination. So a finding from one of the quoted reports says that 17% of 9 to 12-year-olds have hallucinations. He says at any one time. I don't know what that means. At any one time, I guess that means
once.
Yeah, no, exactly. I suppose that's what that is. So that's quite high. That's quite a high amount of people.
Yeah. What are they defining as a hallucination, though? I guess.
So it's literally they report something that isn't really there. Yes, and those hallucinations tend to decrease with age, and then they're pretty much gone by the time you get out of childhood. And they make a distinct difference between this and imaginary friends. So imaginary friends are part of a normal development, and those who have imaginary friends tend to have better social and language skills, apparently. And they are classed as a form of play, not a perceptual experience.
You had a yak, right?
I did have a yak. Yeah. Yes, imaginatively called yak.
Yeah.
When we start talking about what children see, we must take into account that it could be hallucinatory.
Or even imaginary.
Yeah. But some of these stories are really compelling.
Okay.
The author I've mainly delved into is Deborah Hatswell. So she had her own experience in 1982 while she was skipping school. She and a friend decided, just because they were young, they hid in an overgrown bush in a place called Buell Hill Park. And when she was hiding there, so they were basically trying to escape being seen because they were wagging, they were drawn by some movement. And what she thought initially was a cat or possibly a bird turned out to be a creature with amber eyes, and she describes an impossible face. Before she could fully take in what she was seeing, she saw something that looked like a combination of a man and an ape. It was hairy, dark brown hair highlighted with auburn, had a thick jaw and pronounced brow ridge. The creature's eyes were yellowed and its teeth were large and square. She reckons it was about 7 feet tall. Now, of course, she is terrified. She turns and runs and doesn't stop until she gets home. All thoughts of getting caught about school leave her, really.
Yeah.
And she says that seeing this really has shaped her life and led her to collect these similar accounts. So I've been looking into her stories, and then I've also found quite interesting as a reference material Nick Redfern's In Search of the British Bigfoot.
Yep.
Because some of these stories cross over. So, for example, she gives each one a title, and one that she calls The Little Hairy Man. This was a family member of hers. This is another person who says they were in the park waiting for a ride home, ducked into the bushes to relieve himself, and there was this strange, short, hairy man, apparently trying to catch a fox. The witness was startled and left quickly, only sharing the story with family until relaying it to the author. In Redfern's book, he's got a story called The Man Monkey. So in 1879, so this is obviously not a child who's seeing this, but it's strikingly similar. And it's got an historical context. Going back 1879, as I say, a labourer driving a cart at night along the Shropshire Union Canal saw a strange black creature with white eyes leapt onto his horse. When the labourer tried to push it off with a whip, this is the really compelling part, the whip passed straight through the creature. Ooh. The terrified horse bolted, and the labourer was so frightened that he stayed with friends rather than cross the bridge that night.
Ghost cryptid.
Yes, but it's this sort of idea that this child witness isn't alone in seeing something in the same part of the world, because this is
right, okay.
This is in Shropshire. I should have pointed that out. They're both in Shropshire, and they're 91 years apart.
Wow.
And they're seeing this strange thing. And I thought it was also worth pointing out. So I don't know if you've come across the work of Paul Sinclair, who writes the Truth Proof books.
Yeah.
And he has been collecting reports. And although this is in a slightly different part of the world, I thought it was worth bringing up because he's got someone, they've actually sent a photograph in. I'll put a link in the show notes. This person says about 11 years ago, and this is relevant because this is he was a child when he saw this. I believe I saw a Bigfoot close up in Kent. He says he shared this with Deborah Hatswell, obviously the author of that book. He points out the weather was great, but the thing I saw was brown and not black, and he managed to take a photo of it on his phone. Now, it's actually a pretty compelling photo, I would say.
Okay.
So we're building up evidence that basically that child there is not alone in seeing something completely mysterious and unexplainable.
I think I'm really interested in the one from the late 1800s with the whip going.
Whip, yes.
Yeah, that's really... Has anyone else reported that kind of almost ghost-like transparency, let's say, or is that unique to that story in your research?
So what is unique to this is making physical contact with it. I haven't come across anybody that has built on that ethereal concept of them and being actually able to push something through them.
It must be kind of semi-solid or phase in and out to actually jump on the horse, right? Otherwise it'd just go through it.
Well,
that's weird in itself, isn't it?
Well, yes, although that raises an existential question about the nature of, say, a ghost or a spirit, because you see the spirit of a soldier, a Roman soldier walks through your front room. It is walking on something.
That's true.
But that people would say, well, that could be stone tape theory. This is obviously a conscious entity.
Well, I think Ruth Roper Wilde talks about that, didn't she? I think in the context of the Roman soldier, it implies that your room, if you can see all of it, is at the same level that ghost stone tape thing occurred. So the soldier walked on the same level. Otherwise, I think she said you'd see them almost just from the top of the knees moving, you know what I mean? Because it might have been lower or whatever. Yeah.
And just before we leave Buell Hill Park, which is where the author saw her first encounter, there's another one here from a person there walking their dog at dusk. and she sees a tall, nude, hairy creature standing near a light. Now, how often have we come across Bigfoot encounters in the States where they're associated with orbs of light?
Yeah.
She said it was about 6 feet tall, rounded belly and bare feet, had male genitalia, a chimp-like face, piggy nose, large black eyes, covered in brown hair, stood there for 20 seconds before running to the trees.
I'm not surprised after insulting it that badly.
I know, piggy nose is a bit much, isn't it?
Much. I'm just as God made me, sir.
So this is, we're going back to childhood encounters now. 5 to 7 year old child, they can't remember how old they were at this point, but between those ages. And this witness was playing in the woods with some older girls. And she looks up and sees a strange, man-like creature crouched in a tree, this time holding a knife.
Okay.
She describes it as an ape man or monkey man, but then later points out that actually it reminded her of images of cavemen. Long, bushy, dark hair, and other than that was naked. The other girls with her claim they couldn't see anything. Karen ran away from the woods crying, and the girls followed, trying to calm her, but she never forgot what she saw. So I was interested in that story because her peer group, as I pointed out earlier, you get these hallucinatory episodes with younger children. Doesn't occur in the older children. Of course, an hallucination is a very personal thing. So this is where that boundary between... We've got all of these reports which sound incredibly credible, I'm sure they are, and I'm sure this girl believes what she saw then. Yeah. But did she? Because isn't that strange? This is a much more human-like creature. It's in a tree. It's holding a tool. It's got a knife.
It's reminded me of Stigger the Dump.
Yeah, that's a very good shout, yeah.
That's what I was thinking of, which could also tie into the hallucination, because I don't know about you, we all had to read it at school. It was compulsory.
It was compulsory, yes.
In terms of the article, the psychology that you were talking about, that there's this certain age where it comes and then it disappears, not from a paranormal perspective, but from a psychological perspective, did they give any reason for why it comes and why it goes?
No. It's just a symptom of that age group of children.
Right.
I think you could apply a paranormal reason to it. So quite often it is said, children remember their past lives because they're closer to the veil.
Yeah.
And I think probably some people would say, well, children are more open and they aren't, they're not afraid of saying exactly what it is that they see.
There's that poltergeist thing of people going through puberty as well, isn't there? There's often a connection made between that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's go to another experience in Sheffield. This time, Shane Winfrow, who was 14 when he had this experience. Him and his brother were playing in a field in a place called the Cat Woods. And they just finished building an assault course with rope swings. And they're swinging along, and his brother and friends suddenly run off for no apparent reason. That's a bit rubbish, isn't it? Leaving the younger kid. Thanks ever so much, Shane, who's confused, is still on a swing, looking around, and he sees down in a stream a 6 to 7 foot tall dark figure, bright red eyes, running towards him. I know. The creature easily jumped across the stream and then ran past him. Shane got off the swing and ran after his brother and friend, and they didn't stop until they were out of the woods. It goes on to explain that this creature didn't appear to be chasing them. It appeared to show some fear and actually was running it away. Ran past him, and he wasn't chasing his friends or his brother. He just disappeared into the woods. But that is something, so that is kind of different to the last one because they all saw it. Although when I got back, a 14-year-old is like, I wouldn't be happy with my brother. There'd be all hell to pay.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. This one, now we move to Tarleton in Lancashire. And this time we've got a mother and a child, and they're walking in the woods, and they see what they initially thought was a poacher in a ghillie suit. Have you seen those ghillie suits?
What's a ghillie suit?
It's like overall, it's camouflage. So you imagine, probably the best way of describing it, when you see images of soldiers who are heavily camouflaged with like a net and they're covered all greenery. It's like that. So
they've got leaves on it and stuff.
That's right. You use it for hunting as well.
Right.
And we have seen this before. There's that famous encounter with werewolves as reported at the Land Between the Lakes, the LBL, when the witness says that he thought that he was being approached by two men in ghillie suits, and then when they get close, he realises they're dogmen. But in this case, the figure is moving swiftly, but not looking back. These two, they're annoyed at the thought of somebody hunting so close to where people walk. And, of course, they've got the dog with them. Yeah. So the witness decides to confront him, which is not a great idea. Mm. When she gets closer, the figure rounded an old oak tree and vanished. The witness searched but couldn't find it. Then she heard a strange rumbling sound coming from behind the tree. Obviously, the thing that they were chasing realised they were too big to hide behind the tree. When she turned around, she noticed that there was a creature there, broad, about 5.5 feet tall, hairy, thick with muscle, and in this instance had a humped back. So it had managed to become temporarily invisible and became invisible by walking behind a tree. She goes behind the tree, nothing there, carries on looking, hears a rumbling, turns back, and sees this thing now incapable of hiding behind the tree because it's too wide. That is so bizarre.
That is bizarre.
And that is seen by a child and its mother. Yeah.
Wow. Do you know how old the child was?
The child was 8.
Right. Wow. Okay. The greenery is a feature in this as well, but for most of these stories, isn't it? Parks, woods, no urban setting so far, at least. No. These are all in the countryside. Well,
or
in parks. Yeah,
that's true. Yes, but it's not all just sightings. Sometimes it's auditory. So I've got another account here this is from Kent. And there's an unusual detail here. The person who's a witness was a child when they heard this, but now they're a carpet fitter.
Is there any connection between that? I was a child once, but now I'm a carpet fitter.
I don't.
What, now you've got a job, you mean, and you're an adult? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he describes hearing these whooping noises, the kind that you hear in a jungle, similar to a primate.
Right.
And a lot of people, parents say, oh, it's a fox or another animal. His mother, who was with him, said she also heard the sounds and was frightened by their eerie quality. That's sort of in inverted commas. Now, we hear this report quite a lot from America, where we get this kind of whooping, and there are some people who claim to have also recorded what sound like conversations between 2 or 3 of these entities. It sounds like they're sort of communicating
in some tongue.
In some kind of tongue, yes, exactly. But these whooping noises, unlike anything they had ever heard before. And then I'm just scrolling up because in the same location, there's another witness. This time it's an adult. And they're coming back from the pub and in the bushes.
No, you don't want to start with that, do you?
They're relieving themselves
right.
in the bushes. And from the trees, they hear wood knocks. And at first, they think, oh, well, somebody's just chopping wood. But it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely that somebody would be chopping wood. And these are like the communications. Again, this is a massive trope of things like hunting Bigfoot. Yeah. But that wood knocking.
I had that the other day while I was taking the dog for the walk. And it was like there was no one around. But I didn't see it, but I just assumed it was a woodpecker.
But was it fast and repetitive?
Depends on your definition of fast. It was a bit kind of, like, I'll do it on the mic. Like that.
Oh, yeah, I think that's probably a woodpecker.
Yeah.
Because these tend to be...
a bit more pneumatic drilly.
Well, so the ones that people associate with wood apes or Bigfoot, they're kind of like they're like bang, 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 and then there's a pause. And then in some instances, some people claim that you can do a similar, and they will repeat it back.
Right. Okay.
So it's like a communication type of tool. All right. Forwarding on, I found that there's another report in this particular area. This is Snape Wood we're talking about now.
These places have all got great names, haven't they?
Yeah.
Snape Wood, brilliant.
This person says the witness and his friends used to play there in Snape Wood. And they had heard stories from a local man who told them that, at different times, that there was a large hairy man that lived in the woods, and they shouldn't go in there and play because it was dangerous. They obviously dismissed them, and their parents said, "Oh, don't worry, that's just, he's telling you that story just to scare you.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine." Then, one day, him and his friends are walking through the woods, and they see this tall, naked, caveman-like creature standing within the tree line. Then, as they pause to look around, there's multiple of them, and they describe them as being tall. There's one male, particularly, they notice, who's about 6.5 feet tall, covered in brown hair, but there are others who appear to be female who are shorter. They had strange, apish heads, but also human-like faces. This witness is so scared they want to remain anonymous, but they saw that with their friends, and they were all under 14. There's a mixture of them.
So it's a troop.
It's a troop, yeah.
Again, you come back to that feeling of, if it's true, there's got to be something paranormal about that. I mean, how do you hide a troop? You know what I mean? Okay, there's one report of seeing it, but there'd be lots of sightings, wouldn't there?
Well, you would
It's
think
not like
so.
we're in the middle of... I mean, I know there's lots of countryside, but it's not like we're in some remote part of, the Scottish Highlands where nobody ever visits. It's funny that, isn't it? They'd be traced, surely.
You would think, but I think, like you say, there is something that isn't just completely fully worldly
right.
about these things.
Yeah. It's not some lost tribe or whatever, yeah.
No, I don't think so, although we could go back to Cirencester again, but no, I don't think so. But what is particularly interesting is that this stands up with something that Nick Redfern points out. So it's not a million miles away on the Shugborough estate. He reports the gamekeepers being so scared by large ape-like creatures that they've spotted in the woods that they refuse to go back in and do their job. So essentially they have to quit doing what they're doing. Wow. They're driven away by these large creatures. He says that the gamekeepers describe finding large animal beds in the area, and a foul smell akin to rotting veg emanating from those nests. So he's finding, so gorillas make nests. That is something that primates do.
I bet they don't tell the new gamekeeper that when he comes in for the interview.
No.
Why have you had 15 gamekeepers in the last 5 months? Yeah.
I mean, that would be terrifying, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But is it because there's so much private land here that something is being able to be hidden? And is it the reason why there are so many reports from children? Because it's largely children who just go and spend so much time in the woods playing.
And go and explore in that way. Adults kind of stick to the track, don't they?
I think that's probably true. Yes, if you're taking a dog for a walk, you just do the footpath. I mean, very few adults go off to the side to build, like we heard in that earlier report, like a rope swing or build a camp. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other one that I wanted to just finish on, these aren't all Bigfoot reports, that would be terribly dull, but there's one which is a churchyard, which is quite close to those woods where the wood knocking was heard. There's a person who only identifies as DL, who's an adult, but used to cycle a route when they were a child and always felt watched on one part of the road. One night, he describes slowing down as he goes past this graveyard and sees this tall figure, about 7 or 7.5 feet tall, dark, couldn't make out any features, so he quickly left the area with all of that hair on the back of his arms standing up, and feels like what he saw was Bigfoot. Basically, it was a hairy ape. Doesn't think it was a ghost or a phantom. Thinks it was an actual physical thing.
Threw the graveyard in though, didn't he?
Yeah, well, it was standing in the graveyard while he was cycling down the road. These encounters with these beings, there's some in there that in her book which are wonderful. They're more like fairy encounters. So that got me looking into Púca.
Ah, yes.
If you're not familiar with Púca, they come really from the Celtic tradition, and they're known as being liminal beings tied to thresholds, dusk, dawn, rural crossroads, woods. This is the natural habitat of the Púca. It's a shapeshifter. It moves into animals, Black horses, goats, rabbits, or dogs are very commonly reported, but they can appear as a human, an old man, sometimes even a neighbour. And the behaviour swings from playful to sometimes malevolent, but usually they're in folklore they're considered neither good or evil, just a trickster. But they do enjoy luring children with a sort of a safe facade. Now, it's unclear whether they have any nefarious reason for luring children. Obviously, this could tie into the fairy lore about stealing children, replacing them with fairy babies. Changelings, exactly. Yeah. But Púcas, I think they come into their own this time of year, because whilst I was looking at this, I found a brilliant report on Reddit from somebody talking about an encounter they had when they were 7 years old. They say they had a very vivid memory, and very in capital letters, of seeing a 6 to 7 foot tall Easter bunny, and it was completely still. So they say that they were getting up to go to the bathroom. It was obviously at night, and at the time, he said, I assumed it was the Easter bunny and wanted to go and play with him, but something told me to move on and go to my parents' room. This shadow creature was big, like I said, about 7 feet tall, hunched over and holding a basket, I assumed full of Easter eggs. Fast forward to today, and my friend and I met only 4 years ago, starts talking about his experience that he had with seeing the Easter bunny with his sister, where again it was a 7 foot tall bunny creature thing, holding a basket, standing completely still down the hall when he was younger. I have never talked to him about this, and nor has his sister talked to me about it. She described what she saw independently, and she says, I just saw the Easter bunny. And then there were loads of other people replying, saying, I've seen something similar. And it made me think, do you remember me saying there's somebody that I used to go to school with, this would be happening in about 1992, as they parked up in a field, so they're just a young driver, like 17, claimed that they had seen a rabbit keeping up with them as they drove. Yeah. So they basically parked up, have a smoke. As they pulled out, a giant rabbit started chasing them in the field next to them and kept up with the car up to 40 miles an hour. So these giant rabbit creatures seem to be something that fits into the Púca. And as we were settling down to record this, you quite rightly pointed out, this is sort of cast in film, 1950s film James Stewart called Harvey, where
love that movie.
The main character interacts with a 6'3" tall white rabbit, and it is described as a Púca.
And you never see it. He just looks like he's talking to himself. It's a great movie if you've never seen it. I wanted to go back to the kids, actually.
Yeah.
Do they describe being... I mean, it sounds terrifying. Do they describe being terrified or intrigued or happy?
Of the rabbits?
Yeah, with the ones that appear in the house. I mean, it sounds absolutely horrifically terrifying, but...
They say that they wanted... So that account there said, I felt I wanted to go and help. Okay. As in help with, I guess placing the Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But felt he shouldn't and went to his parents' room. So there's a general feeling of...
So it's not a complete terror.
No. The interesting thing about those ones is that they are... when they're sighted, they're still. So they're not moving.
Yeah.
And so somebody else in the thread, I mean, there's no point going through the whole thread because it's just a lot of people going, I saw something similar too. There is one person that describes seeing the waistcoat on the rabbit.
Right.
And somebody else then sort of saying, well, maybe you've got that confused with Alice in Wonderland and the White Rabbit, because that is often, well, in the story, it's wearing a waistcoat with a watch in the pocket.
Yeah, but it's also almost thinking maybe more in America, it's almost the American trope of the Easter Bunny, isn't it? In a bow tie and a waistcoat.
That's right, that's right. I don't know why rabbits are supposed to look so good in waistcoats, but...
Yeah, and bow ties, yeah.
But no, that would be a Púca because it's Easter time and it's doing its trickster thing. it's saying to the kids, oh, yeah, the Easter Bunny is here.
Yeah.
Very similar to a couple of Christmases ago, we covered encounters with Santa.
Yeah.
People saying that they'd heard sleigh bells, they'd heard the reindeer hooves on the roof. Again, it's that playful, like, manifestation of something that you think shouldn't be there but is there. No one's ever going to believe you. You won't even believe yourself.
Yeah, or like you said earlier, some kind of vivid, imaginatory, half-sleepy illusion that you create because it's that time of year. Do you know what I mean? That would be the skeptic view, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think it probably would.
Yeah.
But here are some other sightings from children that sound more like Púcas than wild men. This one is from Ireland in 1959, and it's a 10-year-old girl who's called Bridget, and she comes from County Mayo, and she describes meeting what she says was a lovely black dog while she was picking blackberries near a fairy mound. There's something you probably shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But she said it looked like a neighbour's pet, wagging its tail, nudging her hand, so she petted it, fed it some berries, but when she turned to leave, get this, the dog spoke in a low voice, saying, "Stay with me."
Ooh.
Terrified.
Oh, that's terrifying.
She turns around and runs. And as she looked behind her, it started following her, and its eyes had begun glowing. And then she crossed the stream, and the dog wouldn't follow. Her mother, after she'd been told about this by her daughter, believes it was a Púca testing the girl's courage. Bridget, of course, refused to return to the mound and had nightmares for months.
I'm not surprised.
Fearing dogs despite their familiarity.
Yeah.
And this account is actually archived in Dublin's National Folklore Collection.
Wow.
Because it's quite a rare and detailed account. So that girl who is still alive, I found an interview with her. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. It was just in a paper. But she said, oh, yes, I swear that is exactly what I saw. And this, she said, I hear that dog's voice in my head every day.
What did it say again?
It said, "Stay with me." I know.
Is there any folklore about them not being able to cross water? Or because it seems like the stream did the trick. That's one to remember in your back pocket if you ever come across one. There
is, but the folklore is... I looked at that. It's not incredibly decisive.
Okay.
But folklore around bridges and water is another thing. But you end up crossing different worlds because if a Púca is a fairy, it has no problem. If a Púca is a Púca, maybe Púcas do have a problem with water. It depends how you classify them.
I'm keeping it in my vault in my mind in case I do ever come across one. There's a stream. I'm going to give that a go. That sounds terrifying.
So this account is one of my favourite. This comes from the 14 Times in 1969, and it's related by a 7-year-old boy, Tommy, who lives in Devon, and he encountered a rabbit whilst playing near a stone circle. He said it looked soft and cuddly, hopping close, thought it was just someone's pet, so he fed it some grass. And then it sat up and whispered his name in a scratchy voice, telling him to come to the stones. Tommy fled, screaming, and later said that the rabbit's eyes were too big, like shiny coins. This is an alien screen memory, surely.
Yeah,
if it's not a Púca. His parents found no animal, but noted his deep fear of rabbits afterwards, refusing to visit the countryside. The letter's author linked it to local tales of pixies mimicking harmless creatures. No physical evidence emerged, but his trauma, verified by a schoolteacher's report in a follow-up, marked as a genuine, unsettling memory.
Wow.
Now, we mentioned Paul Sinclair earlier, and in his book, I think it's the one called Night People, he relates an account where he is walking back with his parents late one night. He's about 7, and they're coming back from a New Year party, which is why they're all together late at night, and it's crisp frost on the ground, ice, and there's some snow in the fields. And he encounters a rabbit and 2 guinea pigs in the middle of the road, and he thinks they're just escaped pets, he calls them, and asks his parents to pick if he can pick them up and play with them. And they're like, no, just ignore it.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say that he sees a tall, it's essentially a grey, like, alien creature in a field next to where they're walking. And he thinks that the animals were put there to distract him from looking over and seeing the alien, and possibly overlaying a screen memory.
A rabbit and 2 guinea pigs will do that to you.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? Like at midnight on New Year's Day.
That's strange enough.
In the frost.
You know.
But those don't talk to him. This. Tommy.
Oh, no.
I know.
Oh, what's this with the talking?
That's what makes it even more
awful.
awful.
Yeah. Well, do they know your name? You know, I was thinking that with the stone circles. It's a bit of you goes, I wonder what would happen if he said, yeah, right, I'll come to the stone circles then.
Well, it sounds like, so the people there claiming that there's tales of pixies mimicking creatures, that does sort of go with the fairy lore of being taken to the pet fairy land, being properly glamorized, having to turn your clothes inside out and all of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, whether this is a Púca or not, but it seems like a genuine account.
Yeah.
And then I was surprised to find a genuine account by John Keel in the Mothman Prophecies. This had completely missed me. But in that book, there's a report from a 9-year-old girl called Sarah who sees a smiling man outside her window. Now, the smiling man, we know that is part of the Mothman Prophecies kind of lore.
Yeah.
But in this case, as it's being reported by a child, let's just hear what she has to say. He looks like a nice uncle, waving like her relatives did. So he waved back, thinking that it was safe. But his grin widened unnaturally, and he vanished into a shadow and whispered, I'll see you soon. Oh. She's inconsolable, refuses to sleep alone for weeks, convinced that there's somebody in the shadows watching her. Her mother reported it to investigators, who tied it to other Men in Black sightings, entities posing as similar figures before turning menacing. She says that this trauma stayed with her for many years, but it kind of got buried amongst the rest of the Mothman tales because it doesn't quite fit with the rest of it. And that does fit with a Púca pretending to be a human, and particularly an older human that they would feel comfortable with.
Why can't they just say, I like carrots? that would, you know, why does it have to be something, I'll see you soon?
But it's so Stephen King.
Yeah, it really
is,
isn't it? Yeah.
Like,
we all float down here,
Right, yeah. And there's the amount of people, I mean, we spoke about it not so long ago, the people where they say, oh, I had to commit those murders because the next door's dog told me to do it. It's quite often associated with I guess, possession, as well as schizophrenia. So I don't really know what to make of those, but it does make me where all of this was coming from was this kind of what's happening with children. What is it that they're seeing? Why won't people believe them? And is there any relationship between it? So what we've got there is a whole collection of, like, I guess, British hairy man, wild man tales, then some others which seem a lot more Púca-like, but the ones where you get they're more Púca-like, they really turn into like almost cultural priming for UFOs and alien abductions. So obviously we know a lot about, we've spoken at length about how people are taken and given screen memories, and how some children are taken and, like, you know, all they remember seeing is like a deer in the woods with unusually large
this
eyes.
Could be connected with that.
Yeah, I really feel like it should, because if you look at the work of the Messengers, Mike Clennon, and the Owls, the number of people there who claim to have these owls, you know, a really common scenario is that you in your house you suddenly realise there's an owl on a branch who's watching you every night, and then you realise without noticing, you kind of go, oh, that's a massively big owl. You know, this owl is like 5 foot tall and has eyes the size of dinner plates. You're like, oh, that's not an owl at all, is it? But you don't, you go with it for weeks thinking, oh, it's just an owl. feels very similar to these accounts here, that there is something, it's either a trickster or, Mike suggests that it's screen memories, but it all blends into, is Púca just another name for an alien screen memory? And are those children's accounts of the wild men, are they actually seeing something else that's real? So are we seeing that like there's two distinct categories of sighting here,
or even two distinct categories of interpretation, because it's easier. It would make sense actually, if you countering what I said earlier, if you end up seeing the Easter Bunny around Easter, that would kind of make sense with that theory, wouldn't it? Because your brain is trying to process it in a way that you might understand in that moment. And if the Easter Bunny at that point is ever present, you might see an Easter Bunny rather than an ape man.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. Although that goes with if you're a Púca, you're going to probably do Santa at Christmas, the Easter Bunny at Easter, and then I don't know what else the rest of the year. But if it's
werewolves on a full moon,
right? Yes, okay, that makes sense. Yes, maybe you get what you wish for. It's almost like tulpa. You're manifesting these things.
Process it the way that you can handle is what we're saying, isn't it? Rather than an alien grey, it's like, I know seeing a werewolf is kind of pretty scary, but it might be less scary than seeing an alien. I don't know.
One of the curious things about that, I'm just looking at my notes, so it seems like you'd kind of laugh this off, but there was a study done in America, and 17% of children report seeing something odd on Halloween night. Now, of course, there's people dressed up and whatever, but these children say, so there's one where they claim they saw Jack Skellington. You go, well, that was just someone dressed up as Jack Skellington.
Yeah.
But not in this case, because it's walking on the roof of the house at 2 a.m. in the light of the moon.
Right.
And, of course, because it's Halloween, it's all written off because of that.
Yeah.
Of course you would see it.
Perfect cover.
It's the perfect cover. And what better for a child to see than Jack Skellington, because the child knows what that is. So you're playing with their imagination, making them feel foolish for telling their parents, and yet there they are. So you do find that there's these strange reports but that particular thing comes from a study into childhood imagination and imaginary friends.
It's very E.T. that, isn't it? Just taking him round on Halloween. It's very E.T.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do next with this particular journey is look at it the other way round, and people who claim to have seen children aboard UFOs. That is a much longer journey, because the accounts there are somewhat, I don't know, they're laced with some lore, and it's very hard to know exactly where you find. I've read some accounts, and they're all pretty similar. But after we talked about the chap that I met while I was making that show, who claimed to have been half alien, I think that the idea of children having different perceptions and powers is something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of a very interesting way into it. And of course, I've related my own account, but that was when I was 17, so I think that's probably out of the.
You're out of scope.
I was out of scope.
Unless you were a late developer. Can I go back to that? I'm not saying you have the answer to this. I am interested in that phenomena. I think you said 12% of people in that age range, young people in that age range, have hallucinations.
That's right, yes.
I'm really curious to find out more why. Is that an expression of some trauma, or is it something else? Trying to find some research of why that is a thing.
So, according to the article I read, it says they're triggered by stress, lack of sleep, or low mood.
Right.
But the important thing is that they're indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
Because it's an hallucination. That is the nature of hallucination.
So, in that way, like a coping mechanism in a way, or just a byproduct of those things?
It's unclear whether it's a coping mechanism of the young brain, or whether it is just a natural part of evolution. So,
And I was also actually thinking about sleep paralysis in that as well, because you are conscious but you're hallucinating at the same time.
yes, although this is more of this describes it as a psychotic-like experience.
Right, okay.
And so they can last minutes or weeks, but that would fit in exactly with the account there of the girl who saw the caveman with the knife.
Yeah,
That fits perfectly with that because nobody else could see it.
yeah.
It would also fit perfectly with the child who sees the Easter Bunny. What it doesn't fit with is later on.
The mother and child and all those other ones.
Well, and also the two, the brother and sister,
Yeah.
who say they say that they saw the Easter Bunny as well.
Yeah.
So I think that those hallucinations, and again, this is coming at it from a very medical perspective, and that's the only way to come at it if you're writing in a national newspaper. I think the other way of looking at it is, are they hallucinations? I mean, there is medical evidence that is what they are. Of course they are, because this is written by this is from a medical paper. But is that a manifestation of something paranormal? So when somebody says, I see a caveman there, and the doctors look at it and go, right, you've had a psychotic-like experience, and I go, okay, that's fine. But is it that what they were able to do was, for some reason, perceive maybe the ghost of that entity, and then the explanation is nobody else could see it because you're just having an hallucination?
Yeah.
Whereas there's another explanation, which is, that child's brain was open to that at that particular moment, because for some reason that element of the ability heals up when you get to an age. I don't know. I'm obviously just speculating.
Yeah. Also, location could be to do with some of them as well, couldn't it? If you're stood in that particular, a bit time slippy, you know what I mean? It's something about that location that has something around it.
Yes. Oh, yes, completely.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I mean, you've got 2 children. Have they ever reported anything? No,
nothing like that.
No. I've never heard of any of my friends telling me that their children have seen something like that. They've had I've had people tell me that they appear to remember things from a previous life,
right?
And that seems to be relatively common.
Yeah.
But I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, they saw an Easter Bunny" or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's very interesting. So that's why it takes a particular author to catalogue them all. And out of all of her research, there's enough for a book.
Yeah. There's a lot there, isn't there? It's almost, there could be multiple threads going on in what we've talked about on this episode, rather than just one, couldn't there?
Oh, I think almost certainly.
Yeah, almost undoubtedly, yeah.
I think it's a mixture of mistaken identity, a paranormal phenomena that obviously is true, is happening to people that we don't understand, and then some much more exotic encounters which could be linked to aliens and fairies. I still struggle to differentiate the encounter stories that claim to be with fairies with encounter stories that claim to be with aliens. Sometimes they're so similar. The only defining factor in a number of those is the technology involved with the alien. Because rather than being taken into a fairy mound and seeing some sort of party, they're taken to a ship and seen some sort of technology. But the rest of it, absolutely, the two encounters, the lore fits both.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're interested in reading more about some of the stories that I've been relaying today, Deborah Crossley Hatswell's book, People Who Witness Paranormal Creatures, was a great source material, and also Nick Redfern's Man Monkey in Search of the British Bigfoot. And then the rest of it comes from obscure newspaper articles and Reddit.
Excellent.
So I will carry on talking about this on the Extra Scoop.
Yep.
Which you can be part of by coming to patreon.com/TQM pod, because you get everything early by at least a week, and you get advert free, you get access to the Discord server, you get a great community, and you help us carry on doing this. I had to pay quite a lot to access some of those newspaper articles, and you'll know this when you get there. You're like, oh, this sounds good. You get there like, nope, completely unusable for $5.99. Thanks.
I was delving in the CIA archives the other day, and I had that experience because they don't really tell you anything what's in the documents, so you just kind of look and you'll search, and it's and some of them are almost unreadable, and you realise there's a lot of archived articles rather than anything kind of top secret in there. So that's a frustrating experience.
The CIA is obviously free to access, but you get in there and you think, oh, this will be good, and then you find out most of it's redacted. And it's oh great, no story there.
Well, if you get a chance, definitely watch the James Stewart movie Harvey. It's so good. There's nothing paranormal in the sense of spooky paranormal, but it's a brilliant film.
Perfect.
Good. All right, well, come and join us on Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop if you fancy. We're going to be doing that now. That's our Patreon exclusive episode. We'll be talking more about this. I might talk a little bit about what I'm planning for next week. If you think we'd gone a little woohoo on this one, next week I'm going full on tin hat crazy.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
Actually, I should say full on tinfoil hat crazy.
Tinfoil hat. Tin hats, they're kind of uncomfortable, but not particularly
I'm not sure
crazy.
They're great to kind of keep out the alien rays, but no, it's I'm going mad next week. Okay.
Excellent. Sounds fun.
All right.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?